Welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast, made for women who want their healthiest years to be ahead of them, not behind them. Join your host, Courtney Townley, right now as she breaks down the fairy tale health story you have been chasing all of your life into sensible action steps and lasting change. Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast. This is your host, Courtney Townley. As always, I am thrilled and deeply grateful that you've decided to spend a little time with me. And I am super pumped about today's show. And before I tell you about the guest, I want to acknowledge that a large majority of my community is in the years surrounding menopause. So they're either premenopause, they're in the throes of menopause, they are postmenopausal. And those years can be really rough for so many reasons. Stress is elevating, hormones are declining, and our bodies are starting to do things that we're struggling to understand. And as tempting as it may be to fade into the backdrop of life, I want to offer you that this is a time to level up. And I know that my guest today agrees with that because she has written an entire book dedicated to that message. My guest today is Dr. Stacy Sims, who is coming back to the show for a second time. I first interviewed her a couple years ago. And if you don't know Stacy, you are in for a special treat. Stacy is a forward-thinking international exercise physiologist and nutrition scientist who aims to revolutionize exercise nutrition and performance, especially for women. Her latest book, Next Level, which is amazing, breaks down the underlying causes of menopause and, more importantly, arms you with the latest and greatest research and advice on what to do about it. Now, Stacy and I cover a tremendous amount of ground in this interview, including the mindset of menopause, how you think about menopause actually can influence the severity of your symptoms. We talk about what menopause even is and the major hormonal players in this period of our life. We talk about different therapies for menopausal symptoms, including adaptogens. And of course, we lean very heavily into the conversation of lifestyle influencers, things like sleep and proper fueling. We even talk about diet dogma and gut health. And of course, we talk about exercise and so much more. So, without further ado, let's get to it. So, Stacy Sims, welcome back to the Grace and Grit podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's been a while, but I'm so excited to chat again.
It's been a while. And, it's so interesting because I was reading, sort of perusing in the book, your newer book today, and I realized that Roar, your first book, came out in 2016.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I put it into how old is my daughter because we were writing it like the first year of her life and she turned 10 on Saturday.
What?
I know.
Oh, wow.
But first to know on the airwave, we got the okay to update Roar. So we're
cool.
going to do that next. Yeah.
Very cool.
Because science evolves. And there are lots of things in there that I've been wanting to change and we finally got the okay to do it.
Yeah. Well, I think I did my first interview with you and it was like maybe 2018. And I don't remember any numbers to the episodes that I have done except yours, which was episode 99 out of like 285 plus. And I remember that episode number because I have referenced it and referred it and recommended it so many times.
Awesome.
So if that tells you anything about what good that did in the world.
Oh, thanks.
That's
great.
Something. But I would love to start. I've obviously already introduced you in the intro, but I would love to have you speak to just your passion for women's health, because as a nutrition scientist, as an exercise physiologist, there's so many directions you could have gone. And so I'm just curious to know, like, what led you here?
It was all selfish. it always starts off as a weekend. We all want to do something for ourselves, right? So when I started university and like, truth be known, when I first went to university, I wanted to be a poli-sci French major and work for the UN, but I fell asleep in every poli-sci class. And so I was like, that's not
good indicator. Probably you shouldn't go that route.
Yeah. And then my roommate was taking a biomech class and exercise physiology, and she was a volleyball player, and I was on the crew team. She's like, you should really look at this major. And the first class I went to, I was like, this is where I belong. But along the way, in that changeover and really going, hey, wait a second, this is super interesting, but I'm an athlete, and there are things that don't quite make sense. Like, you're following protocols, and I'm working hard, and my teammates are working hard, and I just wanted to know more, and I couldn't find those answers. So the seed had been planted when I'm asking questions, and I'm like getting the answer of, we don't know. We don't do studies on women. We don't know enough about men. We need to find this out in men, and it's the same in women. And none of that sat well, because as my mom would tell you, I was the kid that grew up asking why. So it kind of all started there. And then as I grew as an athlete and got higher in competition levels, it became even more important to understand what was going on, how to tweak things to get that extra 2%, not only for me, but for teammates as well. So when you're racing on the professional bike circuit and you're racing as a team, you want to get the best out of your teammates, including yourself. And so it just kept driving that academic question and having the ability to be in an academic position across the board to answer those questions and then transfer it over to what I was doing to be able to help people. And then when I retired, still keep helping people.
Absolutely. Well, I'm so glad that didn't sit well with you when you were in school and sort of putting together that, hey, maybe what works for men doesn't work for women, and just wanting to optimize your own health, because that came across obviously so crystal clear in your first book, which for those of you listening that may not be familiar with Stacy Sims, you will definitely be after this episode. But her first book was Roar, and it really helped to normalize the role that hormones play in female physiology. I think it also helped both men and women to normalize the respect we need to pay to these hormones in order to optimize health. So it was a huge breath of fresh air, because I can't think of anything that was out there prior to that book that spoke to hormones in the way that you did. So I personally found it really refreshing. And I know that there was one chapter in your first book on menopause, like you talked about it. But now your new book is heavily dedicated.
All about that,
to menopause, which is so awesome. So the new book, just so everyone knows, is called Next Level. And the subtitle is Your Guide to Kicking Ass, Feeling Great, and Crushing Goals Through Menopause and Beyond. And it is brilliant. It is incredibly resource heavy. So there's a lot of support in this book. And I personally think it's a really valuable book for women across all ages and stages of life to read. Because if I was in my 30s and read a book like this, I think it would have hugely influenced the way that I was taking care of myself in my 30s.
Oh, yeah, totally. Me too. Like,
which is why you wrote it.
Like all the stuff with the Roar. People are like, oh, I wish I had this information when I was an athlete. I'm like, yeah, me too. But now it's out there. And the same with this book. It's like, I wish I had known I had an insight because of the work I was doing at Stanford with the Women's Health Initiative and being very ensconced in public health with human performance, but didn't really put it all together until I started getting older and getting questions from peers and people who were around me and going, okay, let's see. All right. And then getting the questions, and then Celine also saying, I'm getting so many questions and I'm entering this phase. It's like, yeah, me too. Okay, let's do this.
Yeah. A big gap that needed to be filled in the knowledge base for women.
Yeah.
So I personally love the way that you intro this book, which is talking about the mindset of menopause. And history has done us no favors in this regard, right? The way that we have looked at menopause, perimenopause, postmenopause through the years has really made women dread it. And also not given, I think, maybe inspiration to maybe the medical community and men to understand it to the degree that we need to understand it to move through it gracefully. And one of the things that you say specifically, which I love so much, is how we view aging culturally and societally influences how we view it personally. And impressions of menopause can influence the severity of menopausal symptoms.
Yeah.
Will you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So I guess the best way to put it from a Western perspective is just current pop culture, right? So when you see interviews of actresses that we knew in their 20s and now are in their 50s, right? They still have to look like they're in their 20s. But if you see actors that were in their 20s and now we see they're in their 50s or older, it doesn't matter so much. Some of them kind of quote gracefully age, but there isn't this pressure to look like what they look like when they're 20s. So when we see that always flash, this is the ideal that women feel like they have to abide by, that they can't grow old. They can't put on some fluff. They can't get wrinkles. None of this, because we are always bombarded by images, regardless of TV, print media, Instagram, all of these things. And when we start looking in our own culture and you say the word menopause and someone says, ooh, menopause, then immediately comes forward as a woman with gray hair, Dowager's hump, abdominal obesity, never looking strong and lean. So it's these automatic images that we have, which then perpetuates the conversation. So if we are constantly bombarded by that negativity, then we take it upon ourselves and hold this burden of negativity. And we know that the psychological can supersede the physiological. So if we always have this, I'm getting that age, I should be experiencing these symptoms. And then all of a sudden you start having vasomotor symptoms, hot flashes. They can become worse because you're so worried about them. And psychologically, it just increases the intensity of everything that you're experiencing. When we look at non-Westernized societies who have embraced menopause as part of the natural progression of life and going, sweet, now I'm in menopause. I should embrace it because I don't have to worry about bleeding. I am now a quote, elder with knowledge and experience. People come to me to ask questions. They don't experience it. And I think even in the book, we're like, there is no word for hot flash in Japanese because it's not just part of it. So it is totally a cultural thing. And then we have people in the States who go, well, look what's happening in Japan. They don't have menopause symptoms. They do, but they don't acknowledge it like Western society does because it's just normal. It's just part of it and everyone embraces it.
Yeah, that psychological piece is so big because I know you throughout the book talk a lot about cortisol and how our ability to sort of manage it in these years is a little challenged by the absence of things like estrogen and progesterone. And psychological stress has a huge impact on cortisol. So it's like over-exercising or under-eating. It's one more way we're stressing out our system.
Yeah.
So let's set the stage for a conversation around menopause in that this sounds so naive, but I know, and especially from reading your book, that I've misused the word menopause because menopause, as you explain, is really like one day of your life. You haven't had a period for a year. So will you kind of elaborate on what is sort of the bigger conversation we're having in this book? Because yes, menopause is that one day, but really it's what's happening on either side of that day.
Yeah. So you're not alone. I mean, I was on a meeting and there were physicians on the meeting and they're like, what do you mean perimenopause? What do you mean menopause is just one day? It's like, you're a physician, you don't even understand this. So we talk about it in the general scope. Perimenopause is about the 6-ish years before that one point in time menopause. And this is where we see the biggest changes because we're starting to have changes in the ratio of estrogen progesterone. We know that those hormones affect every system of the body. And we'll see women who are in their early 40s are like, hey, wait a second, my training's not working for me anymore. Must not be eating well. I'm highly stressed. Or they go to their physician and they're like, oh, you're just too stressed. You're doing too much. You need to back it down. If they complain about sleep problems or having anxiety, most of the time they get prescribed anti-anxiety or antidepressants because of that life phase where they are attributing a whole bunch of lifestyle things instead of actually looking at the hormonal aspects.
Yeah.
And then as we get closer to that one point in time, we start to really experience menstrual cycle changes. So we'll start to see a shortening of the bleed cycle, a lengthening of the actual cycle. So if you're usually spot on 30 days, it might be up to 40. And instead of bleeding for 7 days, you might bleed for 2. And you start to see these changes as a sign that our hormones are really flatlining.
Yeah.
Then after, woohoo, birthday of menopause, at one day on the calendar, we're now in our new biological state called postmenopause.
Yeah.
And what people don't understand is all the images of menopause, of the body composition changes and the bone mineral issues, they don't happen after that one point in time. They happen before. So this is what the book is about, explaining what's happening and how we can mitigate it. And if you are postmenopause already, it's not too late to build lean mass, build your bone. It's, again, looking at how we're doing training differently, how we're eating differently to support our body, how those hormones used to support us. Yeah. Because, again, they've affected every system of the body. So it's a matter of stressing those different systems so that we get responses of how those hormones used to be able to allow us to build lean mass, to build bone, to have insulin sensitivity.
Will you speak briefly to the kind of the main hormonal players in these years in terms of estrogen, but specifically the estradiol that seems to create so much havoc in the body as it declines, and then progesterone? I know you mentioned testosterone, cortisol, we've kind of talked about a little bit, but just kind of maybe tell us a little bit about each one and what they're responsible for in terms of our physiology.
Yeah, so we have estrogens, but most of the time we talk about estradiol or E2. And so this is the main and most powerful estrogen of female physiology. We have estrone that becomes the primary estrogen of menopause, but it's 10 times weaker than estradiol. And then you have estrol that is E3 that is primarily prevalent in pregnancy. They affect estrogen receptor sites differently. But when we talk about estradiol, and that's the powerful one where we typically say that's estrogen, it is responsible for stimulating myosin production and synthesis. So myosin, we have actin, myosin proteins within the muscle for muscle contraction. It's also responsible for the stem cell production for muscle protein synthesis. It's a very anabolic hormone. It is responsible for fluid balance, blood sugar control, bone mineral density and bone turnover. It's responsible for neurotransmitter control, dopamine, serotonin. Then we get to progesterone. Progesterone and estrogen, they antagonize each other. And progesterone, in like a natural circulation in the high hormone phase of premenopausal years, as it comes up, it increases our respiratory rate, it increases our heart rate, decreases our heart rate variability because it stimulates what we call the autonomic nervous system. So our flight or fight responses. So we get an increase in our sympathetic drive. So the body is very up all the time. And its primary job is to shuttle carbohydrate and to shuttle amino acids away from skeletal muscle and away from the liver and other uses that amino acids and glucose have to create a really lush endometrial lining. So when progesterone is elevated, our body is in a more breakdown state where progesterone is like, I need all these building blocks, so I'm going to break everything down. Coupling with the fact that we get in this greater sympathetic drive, but it is that flight or fight. And progesterone's job, again, is to make the body elevated so that it can build this endometrial lining, including our metabolic rates. Our metabolic rate starts to come up too. When we think about testosterone in low levels, it doesn't really fluctuate through perimenopause, menopause. We always have a relatively stable rate, and then it starts to decline with age. It does have anabolic properties, but not as much as estrogen in the female body. And then we also have things like luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone. Now, these are responsible for ovulation, but we start to see those two hormones coming up and staying elevated in late perimenopause and into menopause because it's trying to get the egg to develop and drop. But We're having anovulation and ovarian failure, so it's not working. So when we really come down to it, we focus on what estradiol and progesterone do and how they counter each other and how they're responsible for muscle protein synthesis, metabolic rate, metabolic control, how we fuel our body, and how we should be looking at the basic aspects of sex differences from birth, as opposed to just how these hormones affect us. Because when we lose them, we can start really maximizing these sex differences from birth with training and nutrition to really get a good body composition, clear out the brain fog, and keep empowering ourselves to build our performance. Of course, we're not going to be as fast as when we were in our 20s, but we don't have to succumb to aging out, which is so much the predominant idea in fitness and sport.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you highlight that really well in your book. You talk about like half of your life is left to live after you have, on the other side of menopause. And so it definitely is worth the effort of figuring out how we can, work with our body at this age and stage of life rather than just tossing in the towel and being at the mercy of this hormonal disruption. So in terms of hormone replacement therapy, because this is something too that really struck me in the book, is you don't talk about hormone replacement therapy. You talk about menopausal hormone therapy.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So can you explain the difference?
Yeah. So again, I'm going to refer back to when I was working with the Women's Health Initiative. And Marcia Stefanik was my mentor. She's a fantastic researcher, really good friend. And she was the PI for the Western side of the Women's Health Initiative. So that was the big American study that made everyone fear HRT, hormone replacement therapy. And when I was there, the study was old, but we were working on a lot of clinical new stuff. And there's two distinct conversations that happen. We have the pharmaceutical side of things where we have a lot of OBGYNs and people who are doing clinical research who talk about it as hormone replacement therapy, because they're very much in the westernized idea that we need to give women supplements because they're starting to have ovarian failure. It's a clinical problem and we can give drugs to fix it. But the other side are people in public health. There are people who look at alternative therapies that are specific research scientists and looking from a more holistic viewpoint and understanding how language can affect the way people think. That conversation turns around. It's not replacing anything because we haven't lost it to begin with. This is a natural response. We're having a decline. Just like testosterone declines in men, we have a decline in estrogen and progesterone. We just age differently from men. So we look at all the significant changes that happen in all the vasomotor symptoms and everything that comes with perimenopause. And we know that if you use a little bit of hormone, you can transition a little bit easier if you are having really severe symptoms that interfere with daily life. So it's menopause hormone therapy. But we know that therapies go in conjunction with other things. So we think about psychology, you have cognitive behavioral therapy that is often used in conjunction with SSRIs or some other kind of medication. So changing the conversation and what the hormone therapy is called in the menopause transition really makes people take a pause and go, wait a second, if it's menopause hormone therapy, what other things can I be doing instead of just automatically going to the drug therapy?
Yeah, I love it. So important. So let's talk about that, the other things. And the first thing I want to start with, because I think it's very much in this camp of these therapies in terms of alternative pathways, not medications, but supplements, and specifically adaptogens. Will you speak to that and what you have sort of found in terms of the benefit of that for this population?
Yeah, I mean, I've been using adaptogens for decades. Because
explain what adaptogens are, because some people probably don't know what they are.
Yeah. So when we talk about like phytochemicals in plants, we hear, use or eat a lot of carrots for beta carotene. And we want to look at red wine for resveratrol. Like those are phytochemicals. Adaptogens are specific plants that have phytochemicals in them that actually read your body's stress levels and your hormone levels and work with your body to modulate things. So what I mean by that is, say you are in perimenopause, you have an elevation of baseline cortisol and you can't sleep, you're always in this wired but tired state. And no matter what you do, you just can't get out of it.
I don't know anything about that, Stacy. I'm kidding.
So what you can do is you can look to use something like ashwagandha. Now, ashwagandha is an Indian ginseng for the most part. And the compounds within it come in and it goes, hey, wait a second, these cortisol receptor sites are way overstimulated. So I'm just going to come over here and I'm going to downgrade their sensitivity. So your body still might be producing as much cortisol initially, but it's not going to respond the same. It's going to start to relax. It takes a few weeks for it to build up, but it's not a buildup like a pharmaceutical. It is, again, working and modulating and reading your body. So adaptogens got their term because it adapts to the body, kind of like seaweed adapts to how much sunlight there might be, so that indicates how much protein it has. So it is all about reading your HPA axis, how much estrogen you have, how many receptors are being activated, and really helping to level the playing field. And not everyone responds the same to each plant. So that's why you have, you have ashwagandha, shishandra, you have medicinal mushrooms. Each one is a player and can help mitigate whatever is the most severe symptom in women.
Yeah. And you're like, what is the pathway that a woman would go down to start testing that water, right? Do you recommend that she goes to a naturopath or someone who's well-versed in that conversation? Do you think that it's safe enough for women to just start trial and erroring on their own? What's the recommendation around that?
Well, there's a couple of ways to go around. Like, you can work with a naturopath. Most pharmacists are well-versed in it, if you're lucky enough to find a pharmacist who understands complementary alternative stuff. And they should be, because most of them are being educated in that, because it is technically pharmaceutical range. But it doesn't mean that you can't trial and error on your own. So there are some really sedate ones that are really well studied, lots of literature, NIH and CAM about it. So we look at ashwagandha, maca, which is in a lot of smoothies that you get, shishandra, which is a little bit weird for most people because they're like, what is that? And we see things like cordyceps, reishi mushrooms. So you can buy them and use the lowest effective dose, which is often on the label, and know that you want to primarily take them in the morning, because you don't actually know if your body's going to be overstimulated at first or not, especially with things like shishandra, which gives you focus and is more of a stimulant. So you can try it and just do one at a time. Lowest effective dose, see how that goes for 2 weeks. May or may not be something that's really working for you. If it's not, then you can layer in another one that helps with those symptoms. And if it seems like it's in the too hard basket, then definitely reach out to a naturopath.
Yeah. And I think you do a beautiful job of this in the book. Like, you lay it out, you explain the sort of probably some of the more popular ones, the ones that you have definitely tried on, and you give some recommendations around that. So if people want more information on embarking on that, just another reason to get this book. So let's talk about some of the
not a plug,
yeah, go ahead.
but I will say it's not a plug.
Oh, you can plug,
but
it's okay.
Okay. We've gotten so many questions about adaptogens that I created a mini course. It's a micro learning course.
Awesome.
So it's a 55 minutes of 10-minute chapters that goes through what are adaptogens, what are the stimulatory ones, what are they used for, the relaxing ones, what are they used for, and all the popular medicinal mushrooms, how to use them, and that kind of stuff.
Is this on your website?
Yep. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll just, for everyone listening, we'll have all the details to find all the Stacy Sims goods on the page where this podcast is housed. So let's lean a little bit into other lifestyle influencers in terms of things that help to lessen the symptoms of the menopause transition and really help us to rock the second act, because that's, I think, what most of us want to do, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I'd love to start with sleep, because I feel like sleep is just kind of the base level. I mean, if we're struggling with sleep, it affects everything.
It does.
And sleep, it's tricky. And I don't remember exactly how you described it in the book, but you talk about like two wrecking balls like hitting each other because it's like you're trying to get more sleep. And yet progesterone is not working in our favor. And there's a lot of other reasons that we're struggling. I actually didn't know that we started to produce less melatonin at this stage of life, which was really interesting to know. So why is sleep important to our health? I think let's just reiterate that. And why is it so challenging to get good sleep at this stage of our life?
So, a small feat that no one really knows why we need to sleep. We just know that we need it. Yeah. And we see the repercussions of a good night's sleep versus a bad night's sleep. We need it for the most part because this is the time where we solidify physical and mental challenges, where we solidify memories, we solidify motor skills, and our body needs that time where we're not moving to be able to put all these things together and get deep recovery and deep repair. Yeah. If we didn't have sleep, we'd never have that time to do that. And we see that through sleep deprivation. We see that in ultra endurance athletes where they start imagining things and seeing illusions around things like pink hippopotamus jumping over a mailbox in the middle of the forest, right? So we know that the body is like, hey, wait a second, we need sleep. And the sleep architecture is really super important. So we know that we have REM sleep, non-REM sleep, slow wave or deep delta sleep. And each one has a specific rationale for happening to allow our bodies to get into a deep reparation mode, both for physical and mental acuity. So when we look at the mechanisms of sleep, there are two really important things that happen. Our core temperature drops naturally, which is how we fall asleep. And then it slowly comes up to wake us up naturally. When we hit perimenopause, our core temperature is all over the show, where it might be elevated at different times because all of a sudden we have a progesterone surge, or we might be estrogen dominant and that drops our core temperature, but then all of a sudden we have an upsurge of serotonin and that can cause another drop and cause a whole bunch of things going on in the brain, which does not allow us to get into sleep. Okay. And like you said earlier, we don't produce as much melatonin because estrogen drives melatonin. The other aspect about it is when we're looking at sleep architecture and the ability to get into a good relaxed sleep with that core temperature, we also have to be able to get into a parasympathetic drive. And this is what we lose when we have a lot of cortisol that's elevated. We always hover in that, like I said, you're wired and tired because you can't drop into a parasympathetic state, which we need to have that rest and digest. So it's really difficult in this time because of the hormone shifts and how our body's responding to it. So when we talk about sleep and how do we get better sleep, the first and foremost is, dialing in your sleep hygiene. So this is your blue light filters. It's not using screens in bed. It's having a cool room, maybe a weighted blanket, things that everyone should be doing for good sleep hygiene. And then specifically for perimenopause and other women who might be in the late perimenopause, early postmenopause, still having sleep issues, is dropping the core temperature and increasing melatonin production. So this can be something as simple as taking tart cherry juice about half an hour before bed. So you're drinking some cold tart cherry juice, and this is going to drop your core temperature and it's going to increase natural melatonin production. If those don't work, then the other thing we can look at is using adaptogens. So things like ashwagandha, those relaxation ones that drop cortisol, allow your body to get into that parasympathetic state. Yeah. And mindfulness as well. So having the 10 minutes of shutting everything down, being centered. I sound like a yo-yo when I say that, taking deep breaths, understanding, right? Yeah. And it's not hokey because it actually does increase parasympathetic drive, which we need. Yeah. So there are steps to do to get into good sleep patterns. The one thing not to do is go, I can't sleep. I'm not going to get to sleep tonight, because then that really races you forward and gets you into that sympathetic drive.
Yeah. And the other thing you highlight, which I think is so important, is the alcohol.
Yes, absolutely. This is not the time to be drinking. As much as you think you're crazy and you need to drink, this is not the time to be drinking.
No, because it seems at the time like it's a great idea to unwind. And then, of course, a few hours later, you're wide awake in bed. Not to
Yeah,
mention, there's a ton of other reasons, but for
yeah.
sleep specifically, it can definitely raise a lot of challenges. All right, let's talk about fueling because this, I mean, I'm sure this is where you spend a lot of conversations, I would imagine, in terms of interviews around this book, because I think women, at least my experience of working with a lot of women in a lot of different age groups, is all women are underfed. I shouldn't say all, but a large majority of women are underfed. And they're also buying into a lot of diet dogma.
Yes.
And you really lean into that in this book and how being underfed and doing extreme things like intermittent fasting and ketogenic dieting can really create obstacles to performance and feeling awesome in the second half of life. So let's lean into that a little bit.
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, there are sex differences from birth. And then
Yeah.
there are epigenetic exposures that happen at puberty with estrogen and progesterone. So I'm going to separate them a bit here. So
Okay.
we talk about sex differences from birth. We're talking about the XX versus the XY. And we know that XX, the biological female, we have inherently different muscle responses to metabolism. So we have more of the protein within the mitochondria or the powerhouse of the muscle that allows us to use free fatty acids. We also have more type 1 fibers that make us more endurant. And then when we have estrogen that comes along in puberty, it increases our body's ability to spare carbohydrate, use more free fatty acids, and progesterone also comes into play there. So when we start to lose progesterone and estrogen, we still are able to burn more fat. But the thing about it is, if we don't fuel, we can't tap into that. Because the other aspect is we don't necessarily tap into liver and muscle glycogen that we hear so much about, like, oh, you're going to be glycogen depleted. No, we use our blood sugar first.
Yes.
And then we start to tap into fatty acids. We don't really tap so much into muscle glycogen.
Yeah.
And this is inherent regardless of age. So when we start losing estrogen and progesterone, we need to be very cognizant that we need to be fed in order to have an elevation in blood sugar, in order to get our metabolism to where it needs to be, to do the things that we love, the intensity sessions or the lifting sessions, those kinds of things. We also know that women who have maybe 90 grams ish, or sorry, not 90 grams, 90 calories of protein, so about 20 grams of protein before they exercise, that actually feeds forward, improves the exercise portion of the training, and elevates resting metabolic rate post-exercise, more so than having a dose of carbohydrate. And throughout research, the small amount that has been done on fasted versus fed, ketogenic diet also has come up. Women don't do well. We see changes that happen in men, but we don't see positive outcomes for women. The other aspect about it is in our brain, in the hypothalamus, where we register calorie density and nutrition status. Men have one area in the brain, especially in the hypothalamus, that has what we call kisspeptin neurons. Women have two. We have two because we have a menstrual cycle. And these two areas are very sensitive to calorie and nutrition. When we don't have calories coming in, we don't have the blood sugar that's there to provide fuel for stress. We get the signaling to downregulate those. And it's a lot of big sciencey words, but for the most part, we think about it as men can exist without having any kind of endocrine or hormone dysfunction when they hit 15 calories per kilogram of fat-free mass. Women sit at 40. Between 35 and 40. When we drop below that, we start seeing dysfunction because of this interference or this downregulation in the brain. So then when you start looking at fasted training, of course men get better because they haven't quite reached that low threshold. But for women, you start doing fasted training, the body's like, what the? How am I going to adapt to this stress? I've got other things I need to take care of, like the brain, the gut, the heart, the liver, skin, all of those things. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about training, we need to fuel for what we are doing. And then the other side of things is we need to recover from what we're doing Otherwise, we burn through our protein, we burn through our lean mass because we stay in a breakdown state. We call it a catabolic state.
Yeah.
And the body's like, I need some energy, I need something. And it's going to conserve fat because fat is a very valuable commodity, both from insulation, but it's a very good fuel source, heavy fuel source. But it doesn't want to tap into that yet. So it starts burning lean mass. It's like, I'm going to burn off this because amino acids I need, and muscle is very energy hungry. So if you're not fueling, then why are you trying to exercise? Because you're just going to burn through your lean mass. And we already have that issue with perimenopause and postmenopause of losing our lean mass.
Yeah. So can we talk about like some really pointed advice around feeding? Because I definitely want to talk about like carbohydrates, right? You're not saying that carbohydrates aren't good for people to consume in any way, shape, or form. You're saying it's important, right? But we have to focus on the quality. We have to respect carbohydrates.
Definitely.
So can we talk about specifically carbs and protein and just kind of recommendations around that? And I realize that all of this is very ballparked, right? This is a broad stroke because everybody is very individualized. But these are the questions that I constantly am coming up against. And I would love to have your intake on this.
First and foremost, carbohydrates are our friend. We need carbohydrates.
They are.
Totally need them. And like you said, it comes down to the quality of them. So as we get into peri and postmenopause, we're more insulin resistant. The time to eat our, quote, favorite carbs, the quick carbs, is in and around training. Because like I said, you need blood glucose. So it's going to be a quick hit to bring that blood glucose up. But the rest of the time, we want to look at fruit and veg, high fiber. We know fiber is super important for health, performance, and that deep gut bacteria that we
talk a lot about.
Right. Because we want to grow this specific phyla of bacteria that encourages us to be lean. If we don't, then we encourage the growth of the bacteria that holds on to body fat. And the way we do that is eating lots of fibery fruit and veggies and whole grains because they love that. So carbohydrates, good. When we think about protein, there is an age response as well as a hormone response. With the fact that we become more anabolically resistant as we age. And when we drop estrogen, which is our primary anabolic hormone, we become even more anabolic resistant. So anabolic is growth. It's the muscle protein synthesis. So when we're looking at protein, we know that women as they age need more protein. And it's really important in perimenopause that we have protein at regular intervals throughout the day. And hitting around 30 grams at each meal, and definitely banking either side of our training with some protein. Because we need increased amount of circulating amino acids, not only for muscle protein synthesis, but for gut health, for brain health, for a lot of other things that our body uses amino acids for. And I think the biggest pushback I get from the book is how much protein is recommended. So we're saying around a gram per pound. So around that 2 to 2.3 grams per kilogram. And people are like, what? That's so much protein. It's like, it's not really. When you think about the general recommendation for women in the sedentary world where they're like, 0.6 to 0.8 grams per pound, is based on sedentary old men. It doesn't have anything to do with women. So when you start looking at the research that's been done on women, they're like, hey, wait a second, women actually need more. And as they age, they need more. And when we're looking at building lean mass now, we look and say, okay, when we lose estrogen, we actually lose one of the pathways responsible for muscle protein synthesis. Because in general, there are 3 pathways. We have one that's IGF-1 or insulin growth factor that's stimulated by estradiol. We have mechanical stress, which is exercise, and we have amino acids. So when we lose that IGF-1 pathway, we rely on mechanical stress followed up with a good amino acid pool, which is protein. So in order to keep getting those changes that we want with a positive body composition, increasing lean mass, we need protein.
Yeah. So I eat meat. I'm a meat eater. It's one of the ways I have been able to keep my protein relatively high. But I also understand, that a lot of people are plant-based solely, a lot of vegetarians, a lot of vegans, and you absolutely are a supporter of plant-based protein and plants in general because there's so much nutrient value found in those foods.
Yeah.
Do you find it challenging? And I don't know, do you eat meat? I guess I'm curious to know.
Full disclosure, no. I have been vegetarian since I was 14.
I think I knew this I think we talked about this in the first episode.
Yeah. Field trip to a pig slaughterhouse and living in San Francisco kind of.
Yeah, that changed your mind. Okay. Yeah. So let's talk about vegetarian-based protein eating, because I think that more and more people are interested in plant-based protein sources. And it can be really challenging when you're switching or trying to just eat more plant-based protein sources. Even though plants have protein, you have to eat a lot more of them to get the same amount that you would from an animal source. So words of wisdom around that.
Good. I'll dig into that. So one of the problems is when you eat a lot of plants, you get full before you get your calorie needs because of the fiber, which I want people to do. But the other aspect is we have to look at the nutrition density. So a lot of people who are in that whole, I'm eating clean, I'm going to try plant-based, and they eat a lot of fiber and it's low nutrient density, and also low in calorie. So we want to look at plant-based that is high nutrient density. So this is your nuts, your seeds. I mean, we can look at mycoprotein. So your mushroom and for some people who do the egg-based proteins, right?
Yeah.
We can also look at I'm not a huge fan of the new meat substitutes like Impossible Burger because they're pretty genetically modified. So I'm going to put that in the back corner. Don't go there so much.
Like it's like a condiment. You can use it on occasion, but it's not like a mainstay.
Exactly. But when we're looking at like soy protein, it's not a great source. It doesn't have enough leucine in it. You can eat edamame. It's fantastic. Lots of beans. It's great. But a lot of people will reach for the protein powders. And if we're looking at protein powders, don't go for soy because you need 50 grams of soy protein to be equivalent to 25 grams of whey. So it's almost, it is double. It's double.
Yeah.
So we look at peas, like good old green peas. They're good in protein, ironically. Pea protein isolate. So that's a protein powder that a lot of vegans use. It's not that difficult to build it up when you're looking at using sprouted grain bread. You're looking at using nuts and seeds. You're looking at using legumes. If you are vegetarian and not vegan, then you're looking at egg whites. You're looking at Greek yogurt, some cottage cheese. So it's easier than what people think. The issue really becomes getting too full and not meeting calorie needs. Right.
Yeah. So it and like with anything, and I think again, you're so good at doing this where you talk about sort of, the ideal, the things that maybe you want to work towards. And there's a process and a progress to getting there that you don't take that leap in one step unless you want to faceplant.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to teach my daughter that at the moment, but she's...
Oh, man, I know.
It's hard.
You have a 10-year-old, right? You have 10?
Yeah. She's 10.
I have a 12-year-old, so I totally get that world right now.
Right there.
I know. I just keep reminding myself, okay, the prefrontal cortex is not fully developed. Like
I know.
Like I say that to myself over and over.
All the time, I know.
Okay, let's move a little bit on to exercise because this is definitely a topic that I know a lot of people are going to have questions about. So let's start with strength training, because one of the stats from your book, which is I think a powerful one for a lot of people to know, is you can expect to lose up to 8% of your strength each decade after your 30th birthday. And that decline accelerates after the age of 60. Menopause doesn't really help that, right? Because estrogen is essential for, as you say, the muscle stem cell function and maintenance.
Yeah.
So strength training is a really big deal.
It's the big rock. I mean, full disclosure, right? I come from a full-on endurance background. I've been lifting throughout my whole life for the strength component of endurance. But looking at the research that's coming out, for people who are time pressed, the one thing they should be doing is resistance training, not only for body composition, but also for health.
Yeah, because you talk about all the benefits, right? Gut health benefits, mental health benefits. There's so many benefits to strength training beyond just muscle and bone.
Yeah.
And you're not just talking about strength training. Let's be clear. You're talking about heavy lifting. Like we're talking about the 5-rep range, my friends, which is heavy lifting, like not the Barbie dumbbells, right?
No.
Not even the 8 to 12 rep range, which again is a very progressive place to be for a while if you're just getting into strength training, but really working towards 5 sets of 5 reps. And to exhaust yourself at that level, you have to be throwing around some pretty heavy weight.
Yeah, we say the 3 to 5, the 3 to 5 rule. 3 to 5 exercises, 3 to 5 sets, 3 to 5 minutes recovery. And that's a session. And we're not looking for any kind of cardiovascular aspect where a lot of women are like, oh, resistance training, I'm going to go to boot camp, I'm going to do this body weight circuit.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. Because that puts you in that moderate intensity zone, which increases cortisol, and it doesn't do anything. Not only that, from, again, sex differences at birth, women do better with power training. You're not going to get bulky. I know a lot of women are afraid to throw around heavy weights because they're afraid they're going to get bulky. You're not going to look like Annie Torsdottir, who is a CrossFit world champion. She works really significantly hard at building that muscle.
Yeah.
Right? You have to eat a lot. You cannot be doing a lot of cardio. You have to be very cognizant of how you eat, how much you eat in order to get bulky. And
it's a full-time job.
It is a full-time job.
Yeah.
And then when you're hitting this stage in your life and you're losing estrogen, our main anabolic hormone, it's even harder to build lean mass and keep it.
Yeah.
So when we talk about heavy resistance training, it's more for that neuromuscular connection because we lose power, we lose speed, we even lose the postural balance. And there's research coming and that's been published looking at 70 and 80-year-old women who are now doing power-based training just to be able to have that balance and postural ability to have quality of life. So it's all switching across the age to power-based stuff. Now, for women who are like, I don't want to lift heavy. I don't know how to lift heavy. I don't want you to go to the gym tomorrow and try to deadlift 100 kilos.
Please don't.
20 pounds. No.
Yeah.
We want to phase in. We want really good mechanics. We want to work on how you move. So you have sore knees and you don't want to do jumping, you don't want to lift heavy. We work on the mobility around the knees and we phase in load as we have good mechanics. It might take a month to get there. And heavy is very individual. But the goal, like you said earlier, it's the aim to getting to that 3 to 5 rep range and having that neuromuscular. And when you start doing it right and you're sitting down and resting between your sets and you're like, I'm wasting a lot of time. You're not. You're like, I'm regenerating my central nervous system so that I can lift this again.
I love that you're highlighting that because it's so often women want, like you said, they want to do the heavy lifting and they want to do like the circuit training around it. Well, I'm going to sprinkle my cardio in between sets and it's like, well, if you're lifting heavy, you don't have the energy stores for that. Like you need to rest and recover. Yeah. So
Absolutely.
good. So on the note of cardio though, let's talk about that a little bit because you're a big fan of interval training, specifically sprint interval training. So sit instead of hit. Will you explain that?
Yes. So like I said, we're trying to find ways to support our body the way the hormones used to. Yeah. And when you look at you doing true high intensity work, so sprint interval training, we are going full gas for a very short amount of time. So you're looking at a 9 to 10 on a rating of perceived exertion scale of 1 to 10. You can hold it for 20, maybe 30 seconds, and you are going balls to the wall and going, oh my gosh, where's my rest? I can't hold this any longer.
Yeah.
The reason for that is we are trying to get an epigenetic change within the muscle to increase our ability to pull carbohydrate in and rely less on insulin because we are becoming more insulin insensitive and resistant. Yes. And we also want to be able to maintain power. And we also want to be able to polarize our training so that we stay out of that moderate intensity zone and reduce cortisol. We hear a lot of chatter about how women shouldn't do HIIT in this stage of life. We shouldn't do sit because it increases cortisol. But the follow through that is not discussed when you look at the science. The follow through is when you do that, you get a boost of growth hormone, you get a boost of anti-inflammatory responses and a boost of antioxidant responses, which then feed forward to improve adaptation, reduce baseline cortisol, and improve our metabolic control, as well as giving us signals to not put on visceral body fat. Yeah. Super important to do that top end work and stay out of that 45-minute Orange Theory F45 stuff that doesn't work.
Yeah. And let's be clear too that interval training of any kind, it has to be respected. It is not an everyday modality. No. It is definitely like your recommendation, I think, is max 3 times a week. Yes?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And we're talking what, like time-wise, like 20 minutes tops?
Maximum. That's with your warm up and your cool down. It could be 15. Here's an example of, it's easy to relate to this example. So we have 12 minutes. In that 12 minutes, you actually have 6 minutes of work. In that 6 minutes, you do a buy-in of 10 heavy, moderate to heavy deadlifts. And in the remaining time, you're jumping on a bike or a treadmill or a rowing erg, and you're going as hard as you can, trying to accumulate as many meters or calories as you can in the remaining time, to the point where that minute off, you're like, oh my gosh, minute off. And you do that 6 times. Yeah. And you can use it as a test to see how you're progressing. But the whole goal is try to get as many calories or meters in that last bit of time after those deadlifts. And that's your challenge. You try to beat each one. So that is full gas. That's going as hard as you can, looking forward to that minute off. And that's it.
Yeah.
6 reps.
And again, in the book, you have so many resources for helping people to kind of understand different ways of starting to introduce themselves to sit training. So again, get the book because there's so many of these examples laid out for you. Okay, I want to ask you before we go some real quick community questions. These are just questions. A lot of people knew I was interviewing you because I was so excited. They were so excited. So people sent me some questions that some of this we may have covered in some way, but I'm just going to shoot them at you and let's see what comes out of this. So the first question is just suggestions for balancing the training at midlife. And what this means, the woman who asked it, she's definitely an athlete. She does a lot of mobility training, a lot of locomotion, a lot of strength training. So she's talking about balancing intervals and recovery and strength and flexibility. And how do we manage it all?
I know, it's a good question because I get that question a lot too. It's like, how do I organize?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I look at it as an undulating periodization model. So you have blocks and then deload and another block and a deload. So we go, okay, we look at 2 weeks. And what are we going to accomplish in the 2 weeks? What is your goal in those 2 weeks?
Yeah.
If your goal is strength, then we get at least 3 heavy lifting sessions in a week. Maybe 4 if you're doing longer than a 7-day. You're actually doing a 14-day periodization.
Yeah.
And then when we get to a week off, it's not off per se. That's where you do all of your mobility, you do your technique work, you're doing really low intensity work to absorb the hard training from the previous 2 weeks. And then you can do another block. If you're not so much into undulating periodization, you're like, I have all these things I need to do in a week. You have to really pick what are your 2 big things. What are your foci? And if your focus is strength, then that becomes your predominant, what you do. And you can pepper that by doing your heavy work first in the gym, your 20 minutes, maximum 30 minutes of your heavy lifting. And then if you want to do some sit right afterwards, taking the fatigue from the lifting into the mode that you might be racing or your favorite mode, then you can do some short, sharp intervals at the end. But ideally, you separate them and you go, okay, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, those are my lifting days because that's my focus. Tuesday, Thursday, I might throw in some short, sharp intervals and mobility. And that's what you do. You have to focus and say, what is it? What is my main goal here? And it might be that you block off 3 months and you have a focus for 3 months.
Yeah. And it's kind of like anything in life, right? Like we have to make decisions. We have to choose where we're spending our time and energy because we can't possibly do it all the time. And periodization definitely is so valuable in that regard. I want to highlight something you said because I think it's so important that when we're talking about heavy lifting, did you hear what she said, ladies? 20 to 30 minutes tops.
Right? No 90-minute sessions in the gym.
No 90-minute No, if you can do 90 minutes, you are not lifting heavy. Like, can you lift heavy for 90 minutes? I couldn't.
No.
No.
I'm like, 20 minutes, am I done? Oh, thank goodness, because I'm tapped out.
Exactly. Okay. The next question is how many meals and how much protein per meal?
This is individual.
So, and another part of this question, just to be clear, is that how long does it take to synthesize protein between meals?
So the synthesis rate is very individual. And we know, I hear all these things. Oh, you can't have more than 20 grams because your body doesn't absorb it. That is false. Totally false. Even Mr. Protein Man, Stu Phillips, he is really like, no, this is not true. You end up using between 20 and 30 grams for muscle protein synthesis after exercise.
Okay.
The rest of it is used for all the other things your body needs amino acids for.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about keeping a relatively stable amino acid pool for all of the things besides just muscle protein synthesis, we look at, again, around that 25 to 30 gram hit at every meal, looking at 3 to 4 meals regularly spaced, and then really looking in around training where we're going to put protein. Ideally, women want to hit around that 1 gram per pound or 2 grams per kilogram.
Okay.
And that's your daily intake.
Yeah. And one of the things you really emphasize in the book multiple times is just that getting that protein in like 30 minutes post-workout, if you really want your body to utilize it in the most profound way, where men can go up to 3 hours.
Yeah. Yeah. So we look at your body returns to baseline. Women return to your baseline state of blood glucose and synthesis within within 90 minutes. And then, they can extend it out to about 18 hours. So that window is super tight for women. And remember when I said that we lose one of those pathways when we lose estrogen. Yes. So it's super important to back up training with protein.
So good to know. Okay. The next question. I love this question because I taught Pilates for years, like literally at the level of certifying trainers. I don't do it anymore, but the question is in regards to this. First of all, do you recommend eating prior to easy runs and movement modalities like Pilates?
Yeah.
She's basically asking if she can fast before those things.
No, you can't fast. You need to eat something.
I like that answer.
And it doesn't have to be something heavy, right? It can be a half a banana. It could be a piece of toast. It could be a protein fortified coffee. But you need to have, 100, 150 calories coming in to bring your blood sugar up. That's all you need.
Okay. The second part of the question is, what is your opinion of Pilates as a form of strength training?
It is good for, and people hate this term, but I'm going to use it anyway, functional training, balance, getting core stability. But it does not fall into that neuromuscular connection that we want for getting aging, right? For lean mass, it doesn't fit into that heavy lifting. It can be a compliment for sure.
Absolutely. Definitely a compliment. And then this I'm genuinely curious about as well. I have a woman in my community who the other night on a group coaching call was just talking about how aware she is at certain times of the month of a lot of joint pain and just physical pain in her body. And I know you speak to this in the book, but will you just maybe speak to it a little bit here? Because I'm sure she's not the only person who's experiencing this.
No. And this is also the time where women get a lot more soft tissue injuries and have maybe a lot of tendinitis, like inflammation of the tendons and ligaments, joint pain. And it is because we have a higher baseline level of inflammation. And we're losing some of the elastic properties in our tendons and our ligaments. So we really have to work on range of motion and mobility stuff. But the other thing is looking at pulling in some collagen, looking at eating more anti-inflammatory foods, using turmeric. And there's been some really good case-controlled trials looking at turmeric versus like Celebrex and other NSAIDs, where turmeric actually does better. So using turmeric on a regular basis really helps. And know that, yes, you are going to have some joint pain and some soft tissue niggles here and there, but you have to be really cognizant of that and do proper recovery modalities to minimize it.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of which we talked about here today. Okay, so this is my question: is what's the next book going to be about?
Oh, well, we're, like I said, updating Roar, but
Yeah.
I've done the whole soup to nuts with Roar, and we've done this part. And next is the youth athlete.
I knew it. Yes,
Going
that's what I was
through
hoping.
Puberty. Yeah.
Perfect.
So
perfect.
many questions about girls and what can we do to empower them.
Goodness, yes.
And there's so many things. So many things.
I love it. So we're just like literally traveling from birth through life with Stacy Sims. It's going to be so good.
That's how it works. Yep.
Fantastic. Any closing words? Anything that you want the audience to know before we go, besides the things we've talked about here tonight?
Yeah. I think the main goal of the book, not only for the education point, but is to really normalize the conversation around menopause, how we were able to really start to normalize the conversation around periods.
Yeah.
Because I get so tired of women like hiding from the word. It isn't something to be afraid of. It's just we've been in this whole patriarchal society that tells women you shouldn't age. So hopefully this book really empowers women to have conversations amongst themselves and with their partners. I've seen a lot of women give the book to their male partners, their husbands, boyfriends, or whatever, to say, here, understand what's going on. And they love it. So it's
their physicians.
Yeah, that too. Spreading the conversation. So that's a big hope for it.
Well, I think you totally nailed it. I mean, I think somewhere in the beginning of the book, you talked about how you hope that Next Level does for menopause what Roar did for menstruation.
Yeah.
And I think you totally nailed it. It's such an important book. There's just so much valuable stuff in this book. Yeah, I'm just so glad you wrote it, because as someone in the women's health field, to have all of this put together in a book to give women, what I hear in the book really is an invitation, right? An invitation into the second half of life versus like you're just done and we're just gonna, you're just gonna fade out. No, you're going to step up.
We're not writing off, man. Not fading off. No,
exactly.
Not at all.
So the book, again, Next Level, we'll put it on the page where this podcast is found. We'll put all the links to Stacy's website and all of her social media outlets. And yeah, I'm just so grateful for you in every regard, for doing the work you're doing in the world, for making time tonight for this interview. I massively appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me. It's been great to catch up and to talk about all this stuff too.
Always good stuff. Thank you for listening to the Grace and Grit podcast. It is time to mend the fabric of the female health story. And it starts with you taking radical responsibility for your own self-care. You are worth the effort. And with a little grace and grit, anything is possible.